Welcome to the Great Satan. I don't fade things out. I just stop them. I go, hey, that's noise, and then boom, no, I don't. This isn't real radio. So, or any kind of. It's not real radio. It's not fake radio. It's nothing. It's not radio. It is a thing. It's a podcast called The Great Satan. We talk about ways in which American hegemony hurts people, or everybody hurts everybody, or whatever, depending on how far in or out we zoom the lens. So I'm here with Zach Henson today. Will's got the day off. I think he is, I think medically they call that perma-high. He's perma-high for the next week or so. I think, or he's got the Ronies, I think. I don't know. He just said he couldn't do it today. So what have you been up to today, Zach?
I went and got a bank account for the automotive free clinic, and my experience with banking is that I used to go to credit unions and small banks, and they're just as capitalist and ruthless and mean as the big banks, except they don't have 24-hour services. So I just went with the capitalist of all capitalists, Wells Fargo.
Say what you want, and people will say what they want. I've been with not Wells Fargo, but I think it was South Trust first, and then it was like Wachovia. It was like bought out a million times. So I've got a Wells Fargo account that's like 30 years old, like straight up. A 30-year-old Wells Fargo account, and they've treated me
customer loyalty
big time, and they've treated me probably better than any like credit union or anything like that I've ever dealt with.
If credit unions would like ease up on the fines and fees and like be a little bit more generous with that stuff,
yeah,
I would be more willing to go with them and, deal with not being able to have the 24/7 services, not have the fraud protection, that sort of stuff. But they're just as ruthless with their fines and fees as the big banks,
Yeah.
I wonder if they're like legally required to do that.
No, I don't think they're legally required to do it. I think it's just that it's such a part of the culture with everybody else that they're allowed to get away with it. There's no market force. Not that there's no such thing as market forces, but like there's no incentive for them not to be dicks to you. So they just be dicks to you also because they know, and you're actually willing to put up with more because of the virtue signal element. Like we're told, we're told all the time, like, oh yeah, shop local, deal with small business, all this bullshit. It's really interesting too in context of like gig economy jobs. Like how much smaller could it be than like filing 1099 and you don't see your boss ever? Small businesses are basically like that. Like they're not really the boss. They're trapped, and then they're fucking you in that exact same kind of way.
Yeah, for sure. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism, and I told somebody that today, and they were like, "What about shopping at a farmer's market?" I'm like, they probably pay immigrant labor, $2 a day to pick tomatoes for them. Like, if you actually look at what's happening, you're going to find that none of it's ethical.
Right. Yeah. Especially like when you dig back into like, 'cause it's when people talk about like the Trump problem and like the type of racism that's happening now systemically, and that everybody just had a blind eye to it for all these years. I became aware of it during during Clinton, but then especially during W, the immigrant labor thing, and then like what side of the middle, the Republicans and Democrats both are like complicit in this not slavery but slavery, and then how federated is the farmer in that state, right? Like how able to affect change at the like federal level were they? And it's wild, like how there wasn't a left, or there's no right wing ideological market thing, like where Reagan was like pro immigrant compared to even the most left position in American politics now.
Yeah.
Watching that change through those years is crazy.
It's crazy to see the libertarian position like move from like we need all the immigrant labor that we can possibly get because that's freedom,
Yeah.
to like we need strong borders.
Yeah.
Libertarianism has become an anarchism that wants a police state. It's like anarchism, but we want heavy policing of poor communities because of crime. We want heavy policing of the borders because of immigration. We want heavy policing of private property because we want them to protect our stuff. And you're like, you're asking for a freaking police state.
Right.
Like, it's like the logical conclusion of libertarianism is a police state.
Right. Yeah. The libertarian to fascist pipeline is very real. And then sometimes we see it where they stay calling themselves libertarians and actually saying fascism. Like they want fascism. It's crazy. Yeah, because when you go back and look at like even the most crazy, sell your kids if you want to type of libertarians from the late 70s and early 80s, they were all open borders. Like they were all like fully recognized the pyramid scheme of capital and said the more you start adding people at the bottom, it lifts everybody,
Yeah.
It is weird to watch. I don't want to call it, labor theory of value, but to watch the critical economic theory just completely abandoned by that type of right winger. It's really interesting to watch that. I mean, it's not interesting; it's terrifying because they are being fascists, which is not good. So what is to be done? How do we like, not how do we fix it, because like how do we talk to libertarians or whatever, what do we as people that have to engage in labor in a place where labor is sold, like how under capitalism, how do we be as ethical as possible, and do what we want to do for each other without engaging in capital as much as possible?
Well, I think like Marxist, anarchist, communist, that has its own problems with the tanky anarchist sort of rivalry. But I think what you have in this country is that we're getting squeezed from both the quote unquote left and from the right, because on the left you have a lot of fairly powerful nonprofits who are pushing rad lib, oddball stuff, and it's like gained a lot of traction. And then you have the Nazis on the other side, and it's like we're having to fight both of them. It's like we're saying, you're trying to tell a rad lib that hey, if you say something like white people are settlers or white people are colonizers, well, right. Colonizing is an action.
Right.
And you have to do something to be a colonizer. And we have to we're fighting this battle where we have to start getting people on the left to stop thinking about how people look and start thinking about what people actually do in their lives.
Right.
And are a lot of white people colonizers? Yes, that's true, because they act like it. It's not because they're white, it's because they act like it.
For sure.
Can a white person not be a colonizer? Yes, if they don't act like it. And so we're fighting that. And then on the Nazi side, you've got Nazis with basically what amounts to a cultural program, their own kind of identity politics that's specifically targeted at the white working class. And so you have basically one side saying that the white working class is Nazis, and the other side saying, yes, you are, come join us.
Right. Yeah.
And so we're having to fight that narrative on two different fronts. And I think it makes it really difficult to actually, for me, I organize the white working class. It makes it really difficult for me to cut through a lot of this bullshit and be like, hey, look, you know, your boss is making you work 60 hours a week for $12 an hour, and you can't afford to pay your bills. And it's really difficult to get to that basic thing because you got all this other sort of noise going on around it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That middle versus the middle and the far right both use identity politics like a cudgel rather than a thing that binds a working class intersectionally. And while one uses it as like a carrot, the other uses it as a stick, and the right is the one using it as a carrot with white people. They say, hey, yeah, you're a colonizer, come be super powerful. Don't you want to be super powerful? And they go, yeah, I'd like to be super powerful. That would be awesome, you know? So it's hard not to respond to incentives like that. Yeah, that sucks. I think that is a verbiage thing. That I don't know what to even call that type of middle, like that type of. I think that's right wing too. Like the idea of like weaponizing identity, no matter what it is, without connecting it to anything. Connecting it to an intersectional working class. When you demonize any identity, you're doing the same thing as elevating one or all, elevating specific identities. You're still dividing it up and saying this is good, this is bad, whatever, rather than talking about behaviors.
Well, it's got to be connected to something practical, such
Right.
as if you have an identity, it has to be like, I'm a worker, I'm an auto technician, you know? So that work, from that work comes how I understand myself.
Right.
And how I understand myself also shapes the work that I'm doing, right? So you have to introduce some sort of practicality, like what are you doing in your life every day that makes your life meaningful, and how do you understand that? There has to be some sort of, because the way it is with both of these, as you say, right wing sort of ideologies, it's like up in the air. It's like this very abstract type of, concept that defines who we are as people. It's very not connected to anything practical. And for
Right.
me, my big battle with people is to sort of get them down to the basic shit. The basic shit: food, clothing, shelter, transportation, medicine, work. This like basic shit. It's just, this is what the Panthers did. This is what the Black Panthers and the Rainbow Coalition did. They said, hey, you need food, we're going to give you food.
Yeah.
I've got the automotive free clinic. You need to keep your car running. I'm going to help you keep your car running. Just this basic sort of practical shit that is really what, in my view, will connect to people and maybe be able to cut through the noise.
Big time. Yeah, I've seen, not just here, but other places. I've seen a lot of success with people just with a really simple message. Hey, if your taillights are out, you will get fucked with by the cops. And that cuts across race, creed, gender, everything, and says, we hate the cops, period.
Yeah.
Let's prevent bad interactions with the cops, so stuff like that's just nuts and bolts, fuck pigs, fix your lights. And having like using member dues for whatever kind of left organizing to pay for light bulbs is way smarter than like a poster that says, that tries to like detailed explain some kind of minute kind of history or something, that people don't really understand.
Yeah, and you can get to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Get to that shit, but you gotta let people know that you ain't on some bullshit to begin with. Come in there spitting some fucking. If I'm helping somebody, like my shop, I'm helping somebody with their brakes, and I pop up from the breaks and be like, "Where do you work?" "Oh, I work at McDonald's." "Did you know that they're getting relative surplus value out of your like?" They're gonna look at me like I'm fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
No.
you gotta really talk to people on their level. You know, you gotta talk to people in language that they can understand. And the institutional left talks past people, man. They talk over people's heads and past people, and it's a very jargony, very, you know, shit don't mean what it sounds like it means. Like the whole, I understand white privilege. White privilege is a real thing. Like it's a
Big
real
time.
thing,
Yep.
but it doesn't mean what it sounds like it means.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth. That's not
Right.
what it means. It means that there's a complex societal system behind race that distributes advantages and disadvantages.
Right.
Well, that's not what people hear.
Right.
That when they hear that, they hear you're telling me I haven't worked hard for what I got.
Right.
That's all they hear, because that's what it sounds like.
Yep. Yep.
It's like that's what it sounds like you're saying.
Yep.
So we need language and terminology that's going to be simple for people to understand. Very simple to understand.
Like I think one of the things I always gravitate towards is verb form stuff. So like racism as a verb, not as a like racism, but like verb form racisming, right? And like
Yeah.
privilege forms that are like that, where it's like, I've got a million stories about being pulled over and not getting shot when I absolutely should have got, you know what I mean? Like I've had interactions with cops that have ended like way too cool, right? Like, and other white people I talk to too, it's always like they have that same lived experience where they're like, man, if you drive a little bit nicer of a car and have the same skin complexion that you had when you were driving a kind of crappier car, it scales, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, black people don't have that scale. Like it's always just, there's a little bit more of a side eye where they wonder if you have a nice car, where you got it, right?
Or
Like
if you're a drug dealer or some shit like that.
exactly. The cops don't do that to us, right? That is using the word privilege to say that. It's like, well, no, you don't have to be a millionaire to have that. You just have that. You're born with that as the baseline of which the verb form racism can be done to you, which is to say almost not at all. So, I mean, people do Italian voice or what. I don't know what kind of racism even happens to white people. It can, I guess, but the way I like to think of it is like it's a verb. It can happen to anybody theoretically, but it just rarely is possible to do it to a white person. Like, how are you even going to hurt a white person's feelings with race? Like, it doesn't happen. So that's the baseline of like it's like being invulnerable to that verb form racism.
Yeah. Yeah, it has happened to me. It has happened. I have been subject to reverse institutional racism. It is a very specific and niche situation that is not widespread and will not be widespread, but there are black people with institutional power who do have prejudices, and it can come out, but it's very rare.
Right.
And I think it's important that we recognize that anybody with any power can be an asshole.
Right. Yeah.
Anybody with any power can be an asshole, and there are people of all races, creeds, colors, genders who do have power, and some of them are assholes. So it's important to recognize that it's about power, and that all these other things like race and gender and sexuality and even class to a certain degree are an analyses of power. They're not the power themselves.
Right. Yeah, that's an important way to think about intersectionality. That's not you're born that way and you just have it forever and it's this nebulous thing. It always becomes situational and environmental, and changes with time and changes with the how much situational power everybody else has too.
Yeah.
And then decolonization becomes more about not pinpointing moments of power and what caused that power, but saying power shouldn't exist.
And I think to get a little theoretical. Have you ever read Foucault?
Yeah, a little bit.
So Foucault's whole thing was it was about power. And I think people took Foucault and they sort of reverse engineered Foucault and were like, Foucault was trying to tell us how to get power. Like, that's not what he was telling us. He was telling us power is the problem.
Yeah.
That's what Foucault was telling us. And I think that a lot of people miss that about Foucault is that he was really trying to be like, hey, look, you take all this other stuff out of it, you take class out of it, you take all this stuff out of it, and what you're left with is a very complex system of power that manages to get people to do things without coercion.
Yeah.
And and he was saying this itself is the issue, not reverse engineer it and create your own systems of power.
Right. Yeah. And that's one of the it's always hard to think about Foucault outside of the context of how people interpreted him.
Yeah.
Your butlers and your Alan Dershowitz, people that say raping children isn't inherently morally wrong and all that, shit like that. But at his core, he was a decolonization guy, and he was
he was a member of the French Communist Party.
Absolutely, yeah. He was a good guy. He did, however, make some really powerful and rich friends, and he got to wield a little bit of that same power in his life. But that's the other weird thing. It's there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, and that also means that if you're alive, you ate food, and that means that you didn't, you know what I mean? If you lived to an old age, you had to fuck some shit up. You had to be complicit in that system, so nobody comes out scot-free.
Yeah, I've made my fair share of mistakes.
Oh yeah.
I've probably made more mistakes than I've done things right.
Right.
It's probably not that close. It's probably fucking 6-1 of shit that I did wrong to shit that I did right.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get something right this time around, but you never know. Could fuck all this too.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, that's one of those weird things where it's when you start a business, especially, because that is, how do you avoid having your labor value stolen by a capitalist? Under capitalism, you have to become a capitalist.
Yeah.
And in the case of starting a business, that actually means that you're not becoming a capitalist. You just have a boss that is not responsible for when shit goes belly up, right? They have no skin in your game. I mean, if you just took your entire, if you have I don't know if you have a loan or whatever, but, if you don't 100% outright own your shit, then it can be taken from you. And that person does not do the work side by side with you,
Yeah, it's interesting because the Automotive Free Clinic is a nonprofit.
Oh yeah.
So it's funded by grants and by donations. I don't have any grants. It's funded by donations, so it's funded by the community, and there's no socially necessary labor time.
Nice.
In automotive mechanics, it's piece wage. And if a brake job pays 2 hours, if you do it in an hour, you get paid for 2 hours. And if you do it in 4 hours, you get paid for 2 hours.
Yes.
So that's a very vivid example of socially necessary labor time. But there's none of that in the Automotive Free Clinic. It's pay what you can for the labor. You have to pay for the part, but whatever you can. It's also barter. You can barter with labor or goods. So there's no socially necessary labor time in the organization. It's a mutual aid project. And the idea is that it's like a non/anti-capitalist transportation infrastructure. Because in Alabama, we have no public transportation to speak of. In Montgomery County, 7.88% of the households don't have access to a car. So almost everybody has access to a car. It's not getting the car that's the barrier to transportation. It's having a reliable car that's a barrier to transportation. So it's kind of like a radical infrastructure project that's funded by mutual aid principles. And I still got to pay myself in some way.
Right.
My wife is gonna fucking murder me if I do another project where I don't get paid. She's getting tired of this since it's happened the entire 10 years of our relationship, where I have these wild hair ideas and I never get paid for them. Yeah, she's not really gonna murder me. She doesn't care. She thinks it's cool that I do all this stuff, but I'm sure she would appreciate it if I brought in $15,000 in a year.
Yeah, I'm sure that would like take some fucking stress off, huh?
Yeah, it might take a little stress off.
Goddamn. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, it's awesome. And I kind of, on the one hand, it's weird because when you start to get into like what when we're doing anti-capitalism and when we do stuff like that, it's so interesting to me how often it is not only price competitive but scalable and marketably competitive with capitalist structures.
Yeah.
Right. Do you know that it's against, I mean, like, are you scared of any kind of like federated thing or like governing body coming after you for not charging the fake labor value?
I could see it upsetting shops in the area. When you're talking about other shops that have marginal profit rates, that are servicing low-income people's cars and are probably ripping them off, I'm going to take their business.
Yeah, big time.
Big time. I'm going to take their business. So I could see getting some resistance from them. I could also see getting some resistance from the institutional left because I don't do intersectionality organizing. I think that's less.
Explain that briefly. What is that? What would it mean to do organizing that's not intersectional?
So there's a difference between doing organizing that's not intersectional and doing organizing that's not intersectionality organizing.
Okay. Got it.
What I'm talking about is the institutional practices of well-funded nonprofits that do intersectionality organizing as a kind of dogmatic approach to organizing.
Got it. Okay. Like, so you're not saying like this is just for gay people, this is just for white people or black people, this is for everybody. So it is, I mean, I would say by virtue of, I mean, you're not, segregating the working class population or the people that need the services. I would say you are doing intersectional organizing, but I guess I see where there would be a problem from. I wouldn't call that from the left though, because I would call that like a form of hegemonic oppression. The thing that they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Is a right wing.
I think you and I have a different terminology for it, but we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah. It took me a second to figure out what you were meaning when you said the left, because I was like, I just think of those people as the right. But I guess I know what you mean. Yeah, because you're not just doing, this is trans car fixing day, right?
Yeah. It's also not about me.
Yeah, okay. It's not branded.
About me and my history and my identity and who I am, and I know all those things. I've studied that thoroughly. It's not about me.
Right.
It's not about me. It's not about me as the leader. It's not about me as spitting a dogma to people. All it is fixing people's cars and starting up conversations. That's it.
Yeah.
It's just, hey, I did brakes. How you doing? What's going on in the community? What's happening? Oh, really? Okay. that's interesting.
Right.
It's just I've done so much organizing in my life, and I'm trained at Berkeley. I have a PhD, and when I started out doing organizing, I did all this complex intersectionality organizing stuff, where it was all about like doing these weird trainings and like getting people to buy into the ideology and getting people on board with a dogma and this sort of way of approaching the work. And I did that for years. It was very complicated. It was very complicated organizations with a lot of different types of rules and a lot of different sort of weird hierarchies within the organizations. And I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I've done that. I've done it. I got the t-shirt. If people want to do that, that's fine. Go ahead. All I want to do is serve the community. That's it. That's all I want to do. Serve the community. I don't want to get powerful. I don't want to be out front leading the charge. If somebody who has a years long of conversation with me decides that they want to lead the charge,
Yeah.
I'll help them for sure. I'll be right behind them. I don't want to lead the charge. I don't want to be out front. I've been out front. That shit's terrible.
Yeah.
It's awful. It's like it's the worst. Everybody has their own opinion about what you should be doing. Everybody knows what you should be doing. The only person who doesn't matter what you should be doing is yourself. And I hate that shit. And what I want to do is very simple. I just want to fix cars and talk to people about the community, about the city, about their lives, and about the shit that matters to them.
Yeah.
And however I can connect with them and help them, that's what I want to do.
Hell yeah. I mean, it's kind of fucked up, like how simple of a thing that is and how hard it is to like poke any kind of hole in that, to even think about people having a problem with that style of organizing, like,
well, I don't know, man. It may not happen. There may not be issues. I could foresee there being some issues just because, I'm wrong. I'm a fucking redneck and I have a deep, thick accent and I don't really like the term white privilege. And I got some things that people don't like about me. Hell, my wife, so to let y'all know, my wife is the executive director of a pretty important nonprofit in Alabama, and my wife always tells me, she's like, I get tired of hearing people talk about you. Like it's always either something bad or something good. It's just not, no, Zach's this all right guy. So I'm kind of a controversial dude, and I just, I'm probably going to continue to be a controversial dude, but I just want to serve the community. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty simple. It's crazy because if you say, like, for instance, you say, I don't like the term white privilege, that doesn't mean you're saying it doesn't exist. It means that you think it's alienating and it makes people defensive and unreceptive to the message of doing anti-racism. That's a fact. That's just a fact. Some people are super fucking fragile, and that is part of their white privilege, by the way, to be so fragile that saying they have white privilege makes them defensive. But having that conversation separate from organizing makes a lot of fucking sense. Because if we're trying to do,
you're not going to make somebody not fragile by continuing to call them white privileged. If somebody hears the term white privilege and they get all their panties in a wad about it, like continually telling them that they're white privileged is not going to change their mind. Like, it's just not. I've done it. I have done it. I have done it myself. Like I have beat my head against the wall with trying to get people to buy into this shit. And it's just better ways to talk about it. It's just, why do you think that?
yeah.
That's the most important question when you're talking to anybody about this shit. Why do you think that? I think black people mooch off the government. That's the most common thing that you hear from racists. It's the number one thing that you always hear. It's the number one thing that you always hear. And the correct answer to that is, why do you think that? and they don't have an answer. They never have an answer. That, like, can you name one person that you know that is mooching off the government? Oh yeah, such and such and such and such. You've seen her check.
Yeah.
You've seen the check. No, well, no, I hadn't
Oh
seen the check.
no.
No, you don't know that.
Yeah.
And that's a lot better tactic than just being like, oh, you're saying that because you're a white privilege. You can actually get somewhere with people, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm rambling.
No, I mean, I completely agree. Like, that's one of those, like, there's a subtlety to the concept of like bringing back bullying, and it's not bullying so much as just like, just hold people's feet to the fire and not just dismiss them out of hand, but really like, wait, what? And then just stone cold silent and be like, explain that. No, why? You've seen her check. Well, no. And then they backtrack, they get defensive, and then you've gotten somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun. It's also, yeah, it's a lot more fun than like just saying, well, your privilege has blinded you and you're fragile, and then turning around and walking away. Because, you know, 5 years from now,
Worse.
say
You've
what?
made it worse.
Yeah.
You've made it worse.
Yep.
You've literally made it worse.
Yep.
And I'm trying to make shit better. Look, I know my people. My people are rednecks. I know we're racist. I know we're misogynist. I know we're homophobic. Man, I worked in a shop for a year and a half. I heard shit that would make your hair stand on end. You know, I heard it. I've heard all of it, and I know it's there, but none of it was going to be changed by me taking a stand. Like,
have you read Gender Trouble, my friend?
Fuck, man, I'm an oil change guy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm an oil change guy. I don't have the capital in the shop to take a stand.
Right.
Even if I did, I would have just ended up being alienated in the shop. This shit is a lot more complicated than just like smashing somebody over the head with ideology. And, you know, we should learn that from fundamentalist Christians. Does their conversion work on people? No, it doesn't, because they just smash people on the head with the Bible.
Right.
And like, it's a lot more complicated. You got to build relationships with people. You got to have long, deep, multiple hour, multiple year conversations with people that seem for a long time like they're leading nowhere.
Yeah.
And I had people. I have a friend that I talk to all the time, and I won't call his name, but he's a really good dude, but he's a libertarian. And we talk, you know, we constantly talk about this shit. And, you know, he respects me, I respect him, and we don't agree on a lot of stuff. But that's where the change comes from. It's not from, you know, anti-racist training that, you know, 10 white liberals who already think all this shit show up to, you know, wealthy white liberals. And I've done them. It's the same people that show up every time. It's wealthy white liberals who want to feel good about themselves. So they come to the trainings, and it's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to like help my people.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, the work, like, there is nobody doing, I mean, I shouldn't say there's nobody doing it, but the middle sure as fuck is not reaching out to any kind of worker, much less the most let go of worker, which is the white worker, where it's like, well, fuck it, they're going to be Republicans. Well, no, they're not. Like, they're just not. We can get these people on the side of, especially when you get into like what decolonization means as a flattening of hierarchy. You know, when you're like, simple question, what do you think about cops? That's a great one. What do you think about cops? Do you like your boss? What about his boss? What kind of cars your boss's boss drive? Right? Really simple questions like that, or whatever, like you were saying, these are you find universality like that, and that makes it where there is no niche type of individual, like, well, we got to make brochures that are specifically for trans teenagers. We need to make brochures that are specifically for Black people between 22 and 24, right? And then we got to make, no, you have one concept, and really it's about gathering information.
Well, I don't have a problem with making making brochures specifically targeted at trans teenagers or black people from 22. I just want some people to make some brochures for rednecks, like, because ain't nobody making any brochures for us.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I just want you to make us some brochures too. That's it. That's all I'm asking for. Just make us some brochures too.
Yeah.
And you know, pay attention. You know, we're out here. I got my I teach a class. I teach a Marx class. It's interesting. I'm a faculty owner at the Cooperative New School for Urban Studies and Environmental Justice, which is a global online institution of higher learning. It's a free school. We ask for donations, and but we don't charge anything.
Hell yeah.
And we're teaching a Marx class. We're taking David Harvey's lectures on Marx. We're watching them, and then we're discussing them in the class. It's all working class people. It's all rednecks. Mostly. It's not all rednecks. It's mostly rednecks. The people who are involved in the automotive free clinic, the board, it's all rednecks. It's a piercer, a farmer, and an artisanal jewelry maker. Like, it's these people we can be organized. We're not unorganizable. Like, we can be organized. And that's I just want, don't write us off, don't pay attention. Like, we can do shit too. Let us play.
Big time. But the one of the, there's like an old meme or whatever, but it's constantly going where it's like, look, if you don't have the emotional labor to talk to this person, the far right absolutely does have the emotional labor to sit and talk to those people about any fucking thing they want.
Yep.
And they are dynamic in their organizing, big time. Like, they'll reach out to them, whether they're, far authoritarian, is like far libertarian, wherever they are in that like political spectrum, they have stuff to say. And it almost always just involves that same thing, which is, it's basically what we're doing. What do you think about cops? What do you think about your boss? Except it's, they're scapegoating, poor people, immigrants, whatever it is. Right. So we can win these people over for good, or they can be won over for bad.
Every redneck that is organized in the left is one less redneck organized as a Nazi.
That's right. Yeah. Because everyone is a potential hate crime. You're saving lives when you organize, an intersectional working class without writing anybody off. That's fucking rad. It is fucking gnarly to think about the fact that like some people would even have a problem with that concept, where it's like, I mean, I don't know. I don't think that most people would have a problem with that when they understand it, but like some of the verbiage, I think, is what people have a problem with, right? So
it's not the practices, and
yep.
that's where I stand on that. Yeah, my ideology's not right. My words are not right. I'm a redneck. They're not supposed to be.
Yeah.
But my practices, they're on point.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, this whole episode was a hope corner. I was going to try to figure out some like uplifting news, but I think we got pretty uplifting with it throughout the entire thing. Like, yeah, there is no ethical consumption. However, we can do what we can. We can affect change in places that need it the most. So it was really, really fucking nice talking to you. You're the Mad Redneck on Facebook, and
I am my Facebook pages. I'm Zach Henson. If you want to find me on Facebook, put in Zach Henson in Berkeley, Berkeley. And if you want to find my pages, it's the Automotive Free Clinic and Confessions of a Mad Redneck. And we could use some fucking donations for the Automotive Free Clinic. It's going to cost some money to run. But yeah, if you want to find me, come hit me up, man, and have a conversation with me. I'd love to talk to you.
Hell yeah. And that is a nonprofit. So that means that you do have to, like, you're not blowing money on dumb shit. Like, you are, transparent in what you spend your money on. So that's, if you are trying to throw some money at something, and, keeping people from getting pulled over by cops in an area like Alabama is a pretty smart place to put your money if you're a leftist with a little bit of money to donate to something. So I'm absolutely on board with that. I will not be starting a Patreon for this podcast specifically because I just want to point people at people that are doing direct organizing and doing mutual aid to the community like that. So you guys, if you're watching this, whatever, check that out. It's called the Automotive Free Clinic, and I absolutely would recommend throwing some money at them. So we're gonna go ahead and hit the old Stopperino button on the record feature here, and we'll call it a day. How about that?
Sounds good. Take
Awesome.
it easy.
You too, man.